Turkish Anti-Defamation Alliance Group, or what we call TADA, T-A-D-A. And just to connect you with the previous TV forum sessions that we had, this is the third TV forum series we are reaching you with. And let me just state the mission statement of TADA, which says that the mission is to stop defamation of Turkish people and seek accountability and fairness for all. So having said that, our goal to achieve that particular mission is to actually reach our people. And so when I say our people, you are included in it. And by the way, we do have a good example with us now. We have a couple of viewers who have actually viewed our previous tapings, and they are here to talk about their experiences. And our goal is to actually create an atmosphere where people at large, including ourselves, yourselves, we can talk about our experiences which are related to being a Turk, or on issues which are related to Turkey and the Turks. So with that, let me introduce my friend BULENT, who is a treasurer of TADA. And also we have friends here who were the viewers of the previous two tapings that I mentioned, and they will talk about their experiences, and we urge you to also come forward to speak about your experiences. So with that, BULENT, would you tell us about yourself very quickly, and then move on to our visitors.
Thank you, SEVGIN. As he indicated, I am the treasurer of TADA, and this is our third taping. We have the honor today to include in our session two guests from Connecticut. I originally also cut my teeth in association work and grassroots work in Connecticut, and both Bob and KADIR are good friends of mine from those days. Bob always had a guiding hand for us during our early association days. He led us through the vagaries of testimonies at the state capitol in Connecticut, Hartford, and he always was to our side when we needed help. And KADIR is a well-connected entrepreneur in Connecticut, in New Haven area. He is actually the person who put Turkish cuisine on the map in Connecticut, and he's active still within the business community in Turkey, with Turkish Americans in Connecticut. So with that, I would ask them both to introduce themselves in their own words, and turn it over to Bob MCKAY.
Thank you, BULENT. And SEVGIN,
Yes,
it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, because I have such a high regard for Turkey and the Turkish people. And being a U.S. citizen, living in Connecticut most of my life, I'm sure many of the viewers who are looking at us are thinking, well, how does a native-born Connecticut person have this affinity for Turkey and the Turks that are sitting with us worldwide and around this table today?
Are you going to talk about Tarsus American College?
If you force me, I may do that. SEVGIN and I do have a little connection together. It's a very important one. Even though we had never met each other in Tarsus, Turkey.
That's right.
We never met there, but SEVGIN is a graduate of Tarsus American College in Tarsus, Turkey, home of St. Paul, of biblical fame.
Yes, indeed.
And I, through circumstances beyond my control, ended up teaching in the same school that he graduated. several years before I was there. He's my senior.
Although he doesn't show it.
I try to hide it.
But I was looking for teaching experiences overseas, and it came up that there was a job in the Suleiman Islands, and they wanted me to be the principal of a school. And as it turned out, they didn't get the funding. We weren't able to do that, and someone said, would you be interested in teaching in Tarsus, Turkey? And I, without smiling, just with a straight face, I said, I'm very interested in that, and I look forward to a relationship in Tarsus. So then I ran home, as I told them I have to speak to my wife about this, and I said, we've been offered a job in Tarsus, Turkey. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. Where is that? I don't know. Let's get the map out. So, I mean, really, I was a very innocent young man of actually 21 years of age at the time. And I knew I would never be wealthy. And I thought to myself, I've got to get some world experience, and this is a good way to do it. So, without dominating the conversation too much, I would say my wife and I went to Turkey. We lived in Tarsus. We learned a little bit of the language. We learned a little bit of the food and the culture. Our 3 children were born in Gaziantep, which has been in the news a great deal these days.
Yes, indeed.
It's a very, very tough situation over there. And the reason I was really very happy to get this invitation today is that I spent 5 years living in Turkey. Not at the U.S. Air Base, not at an embassy school, but I was actually teaching Turkish boys in a boys' school. I was actually coaching some soccer or Turkish football, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me a very popular person in Tarsus because they had a very nice stadium and the school was very competitive. So I integrated into the community, I would say, very successfully, and I never found a mean word for Americans. I didn't find a mean word for Armenians. And my Turkish friends in later years stated that in their classroom experience, the allegations of the Armenians were never discussed, so that when they traveled from Turkey to the United States, it was the first time that they had ever heard of the issue. Armenians, I had several very good Armenian friends in Tarsus, and I went to their house. I was not seated in a nice leather chair like this. We had a copper tray in the center of the floor with carpets on the floor, and we were sitting on the floor eating, and just like many Turkish villagers do and have done for many years. So I had a wonderful experience in Turkey. I met nice Turkish friends, and the first thing I did when I came back to the United States, I was getting my doctorate degree at the University of Connecticut, and I said, I wonder if there are any Turkish people here in Connecticut, because I had met another Turk before. I went to the University of Connecticut and I met Hayrettin Kardeştünçer. He was a civil engineer, a brilliant man who was making astronomical calculations prior to computers. And he had done some great things in stress. He came here not knowing one word of English, graduated from MIT. He went to Paris not knowing one word of French. He graduated from the Sorbonne. I mean, Hyratin spoke 5 languages, and at my introduction, married a Greek woman. So it's a multicultural, multi-ethnic world that we live in, and I think most people around the table agree that 99% of the people are good people.
Indeed.
There are bad people and bad things happen, and I think this association does have a very important role because, and we'll get to these points later, but
Right.
I have seen things in Connecticut, I've seen things in New York that aren't right. There have been Armenian allegations that are false. There was no gender issue. I have a library that's equal to none. I mean, every book that's come out, I try to get a copy of it and read it. And we can discuss what the issues are, but just by way of introducing myself, I'm an American who believes himself to be half Turkish and had wonderful experiences with the Turkish people. And from the research and studies that I've done, I think we can say very clearly that there never was a genocide. Many people were injured during World War I,
Right.
but there was no genocide of Armenians. There was no government policies to promote any such thing. And that's just sort of as an opening thought.
Right, right. We will get into more details of that later on. So that's terrific. I mean, your connection with Turkey and Turks, and also by way of that connection, getting involved in the Armenian issues and so on, that's really fantastic.
This like unbiased eye, maybe.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yes.
Will make it even
I mean,
credible.
when I went to Turkey, I didn't even know where Turkey was. I mean, you hear of the Balkans, Crimea, all these things. We didn't have television when I was young. There were no newscasters. When I went there, I was like a baby learning how to speak. And I was learning the Turkish language of love, if you will, and humanity. As a matter of fact, can I tell a little story?
Sure. By all means, yes.
When I first arrived in Istanbul, I was on a boat going across the Bosphorus. There were no bridges at that time, am I right?
That's correct. Yes.
So if you wanted to go from the Asian side of Turkey, across the Bosphorus to the European side of Turkey, you had to take a ferry boat.
Right. Or take the taxis, rowboats, right?
Well, I wouldn't want to be in one of those little boats with some of the waves that are out there, but they were there.
Yeah, they were there.
Current
right.
is pretty mean there.
Oh, it's a
sometimes,
very
yes.
bad. But so my wife and I think I knew merhaba, maybe 1, 2 words, nothing. And we're sitting on the boat, and the Turkish people around us hadn't seen too many Americans. 1959, early after World War II. So someone comes up to me and pulls my jacket, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on now? Gazos ister misin? Would you like a soda? And I'm looking strangely. I mean, what is gazos?
Yeah, right.
And I found out it was soda, and I said, yeah, okay.
But did it say Safranbolu gazozu? They were very famous, but never mind. But
well,
go ahead. Gazoz is gazoz.
When we took the bottle cap off, there were chips all the way around the glass.
Oh.
Because in those days, we had the best recycling in the world. We took the bottles and used them over and over and over. But anyway, it's a sign of friendship.
Yes.
Here
indeed.
I was, not knowing the language, not knowing the people, and a stranger came up to me and offered a very small token of friendship, but
Sure.
it's nice.
Seek
Oh,
the
yeah.
contact, yeah.
Yeah.
At this point, maybe we can take a little break. When we come back, we will let Kadir talk about himself a little bit.
Excellent. That will be great. That was
After a short break, we're back with our guests. And now I will turn the word over to Kadir. Kadir, would you please say a few words about yourself?
Sure. My name is KADIR CATALBASOGLU. I am from Yağlıdere, Giresun. I emigrated to America 1992 after spending 80 days on the road. And in the end, after traveling 8 different countries, I swam the river Rio Grande. It's in the map. It's between America and Mexico. That's a river.
Texas and
Yeah.
Mexico.
So 3 o'clock in the morning, I swam the river. That's how my American journey starts. And
where you
the-
met on the other side?
what is it?
Where you met on the other side of the river?
The other side was Mexico, the Matamoros. The American side, town called Brownsville, Texas.
But there was nobody to meet you there.
No, nobody to meet me there. So after I swam the river, I could see the hotels, Holiday Inn, Marriott and all of that. So I was in America. I put up my clothes and walked in one of the Holiday Inn, and I get a room, and I made a good night's sleep. And then next day I was in Houston, Texas, Corpus Christi. In the meantime, there's another city there. So that's how my journey starts to America. Since 1992, I'm in a town called New Haven, Connecticut. So I spent a lot of money on the way to America. So I had to work very hard to pay that back. I spent $18,000 on the way here. So I was a dishwasher about 2.5 years. While I was doing that, I learned other things, how to cook, how to prep. So then after years, I find myself that I learned how to make a pizza. Then I find a job as a pizza maker. And then time goes on, and 1996 I opened my first pizza restaurant called A1 Pizza, A-1 Pizza in New Haven, and still in business. And I started a family. I have 2 sons and 1 daughter. And my son, my older one, goes to Yale University. The first one among the Turkish community goes to Yale. And I still in a pizza restaurant. And the reason that we are here today, I just want to talk about the Armenian genocide. Never heard of it before I came to Turkey.
To US.
From Turkey to US. I never heard that in Turkey. I heard of it in the US, and I didn't know the detail of it much. I learned a little bit about it here. I think that It is historian's job that who should handle it. And my experience with the Armenian people was very nice. In 1999, I opened up first Turkish restaurant called Istanbul Cafe in New Haven, still in business.
A beautiful restaurant.
And I get a 4-star from New York Times at the time. I had a line, you were one of my customers at the time.
I remember.
And even though I did not have much Turkish cuisine experience, I learned everything here. I find a chef from Bolu Mengen. I hired him as a chef, so I had such success in that.
Which is where successful chefs come.
Yeah.
Yes,
Turkey.
Bolu is
Bolu.
And
it's famous for his soup too.
and
And it was also very well received in New Haven. When
Yes.
you opened the restaurant,
I
people were craving for it. A lot of Yale faculty
Right.
went there, as a matter of fact.
and I got a letter from the governor Roland at the time that thanking me to open up this beautiful restaurant in New Haven. And I was in the different the televisions. Why did I open up the Turkish restaurant? First one, I helped the downtown to improve itself. It's changed. That was the beginning of the new restaurants, new ethnicity food comes to New Haven. So when I opened that restaurant, one of the Armenian brother came to the restaurant. He introduced himself. His name is John Kebabian. His grandfather moved to New Haven from Tekirdağ. They are in carpet business, and he donate one of the carpet to my restaurant. He says, "This is from Uşak. My gift to your restaurant is the good luck thing." So he came as a customer. He bring all his friends. He promote my restaurant in his carpet business. And time goes on. I have many other Armenians, brothers and sisters. They all well received my restaurants. They were so happy that that my restaurant was there. I had beautiful experience with these people that I think we have good relations as a people, and I think that is let the historians handle this
Right.
situation.
So where your restaurants are, or restaurant A1 is still there, A-1 is still there?
Yeah, still
Okay.
there.
Is there a Armenian community there?
It's not. Downtown New Haven. Not many Armenians live in downtown area. Mostly local people and mostly students. New Haven has 4 colleges.
Yes.
A lot of college and a lot of school.
The reason why I'm asking is that even, especially in today's environment, what's going on currently in this country, Armenians vis-a-vis the so-called Armenian genocide and all that. If you look at the publications and the social media, there's talk about it. So I was curious that these Armenians that you have known from years ago, they are still friendly, right?
We're still friends. We still respect each other. We still having tea and coffee time to time.
Right.
Sometimes they when they see me, they feel like they see one of their cousins, their friends, old friends. They welcome me that way. That's how I feel it. I don't see any angers and I don't see any bad feelings among.
Yeah. Well, I would like to tell a story that I just remember that, when we moved to Poughkeepsie, New York, then, I love pastırma. So I was looking to see if I could buy pastırma from some place. So they told me that there was, in fact, a family, and they were making pastırma. I said, gee, that's interesting. So I found out what the address was, so I went and knocked on the door, and a lady opened up the door, and I said, I understand you are selling pastırma. She said, well, yeah, right in that building. And in fact, but what I'm getting at is that then I could see from the door there were stairs going upstairs to the first floor, and so some old lady said, "What's going on there?" or something like that. I don't exactly remember, but in the final analysis, I happened to have told them that I went to Talas, Kayseri and all that, and I found out that in fact the name of this particular outfit was Kayseri Pastırma. I didn't know that. But when I said Kayseri, this lady upstairs, she came, I mean, she was an old lady, she came, I wouldn't say running down, very quickly coming down. Now, by the way, in the meantime, I knew that they were Armenians, and she knew that I was Turkish. I'm not going into all the details of our discussion, so we knew each other. But when she heard that I was Turkish, and from Kayseri to boot, she came running down and we hugged and kissed each other. You know, the Turkish way, that is. So, I mean, then of course we enjoyed the pastırma and sucuk and so on and so forth for years. So, yeah, I mean, when you get to the people level, what you were saying, Bob, you know, 99% of the people are good people. It's that 1% who, some bad apples, I guess.
Well, we could probably get to some of those things later, but you mentioned a store, Kayseri. It reminded me of one of our Connecticut Turkish people, Hilmi Sevimli.
Yes.
He has a store in New Britain area called Veggie World.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an ethnic store, it's Veggie World.
Right.
And he brings in food from Poland, Ukraine, Europe, Turkey. It's an ethnic variety of food. And he has a lot of Polish customers, he has a lot of Armenian customers.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to visit his store because he's got wonderful food,
Sure.
you know. But one day there was a terrible storm, almost a hurricane. Part of his building was blown down. The signs came down, and it was quite a bit of damage to the store. The next day, his Armenian customers came with tools
To fix it.
and fixed it. Probably several $1,000s worth of damage. They didn't ask for anything. They liked him as a person.
Right.
And they had these bonds of friendship. They could buy Armenian food, Turkish food, and they just enjoyed life together, and they came right out and helped heal me quite a bit. It was quite a nice story.
Yes, at the street level, human level, people really do get along. They respect each other, and they respect their cultures. There is a lot of overlap also as far as food goes, traditions go with the Armenians, even music. For instance, I relayed one story at our last session about a choir we have in Connecticut.
Oh yeah.
We lost our chef midway through preparations for a concert in Connecticut. And we were looking, and this was a joint project with a Canadian-American group. They were also music lovers, classical Turkish music. So we were preparing for a concert with them. Now we were in search of a chef who would bring everything together. And they had a Armenian-Canadian person who was leading their choir. And we inquired if he would be willing to take over the entire project. He said, yeah, we invited him a few times to Connecticut. He came from Canada. He is a superbly talented person and in love with Turkish music. And as we mentioned last time, there are also a lot of Armenian composers, masters.
Right.
And, we respected him, we loved him. He took us through a very successful concert in New York City. And, again, the point is people do get along at the human
Yes,
level.
in fact, if I may put a plug in for TADA, this group, the TADA, the Turkish Anti-Defamation Alliance group that we are a part of. Let me put it this way, although our guests are not yet, maybe they might join later on, but what I'm getting at is that we would like to be able to I mean, reach to the people at large who are viewing us and have them come up and tell their stories, because there are many such stories. Now, when I say people, I'm talking about Armenian friends also come on up and tell their stories. And so why? Because, well, let me not get political, but I cannot resist saying the following, so that the members of this ANCA, which is the, what is it, the Armenian National Committee of America, like the Sasusian and others, come and hear these stories. I mean, we as Turks and Armenians, we don't have anything against the people of, Armenian origin,
Yes.
for that matter, anybody. You might say that that's a little bit of a Ottoman legacy, actually, because if you go back to the history of Ottoman Empire, they had, more than close to 40 actually ethnic groups, and they all lived and let live. So, but that's another story. So, in any
In
case,
fact, there's tens of thousands of undocumented Armenians living in Turkey and
Yeah,
making a living.
yeah,
without any problems.
I did a little research on that. There are actually apparently 50,000 Armenian au pairs in Turkey,
Right.
and they are undocumented.
Right.
Don't tell anybody.
Well, isn't it true that what we call Armenia today, the small country of Armenia to the east of Turkey, has actually had a very sad long-range relationship with Russia,
Right.
and it's been very detrimental to their economy. So in some respects, you could say that there are many Mexican people that would like to come to the United States because of economic reasons, and we would like to have them documented and coming legally, but some come illegally because they see the economic advantages. And if you look at Turkey compared to the economic situation in Armenia, Turkey is the 15th largest economy. It's a tremendous economy. Agriculture, manufacturing, it's a big economy. And so illegal Armenians flock to Turkey, as do many other
Yes.
ethnic. And one thing, when I was speaking to groups in Connecticut and around the country, like at Columbia University, one thing I realized is that the American public never knew what the Turkish ethnic composition was. They thought that, or many people still do think, a Turk is a Turk. But I'll leave it to your personal ethnic opinion to agree or disagree with me, but my experience is that Turkey is a huge melting pot of various ethnic backgrounds, and I find it to be very much like the United States. I mean, we have a certain degree of democracy in Turkey, and we have multi-ethnic groups living on the same Anatolian peninsula. So America has a multi-ethnic group, and I would say maybe Israel may not, Armenia may not, but
Right.
Turkey is very, and Georgia may not. I think
Right.
Georgians are pretty
Pretty much.
pretty much Georgian and maybe Greek, but in the midst of all that, you have the wealth of people.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we could get into those later, as you said. I mean, Turkey is really a bridge, and also I would say that Turkey, more than being a melting pot, is the alphabet soup. What I mean by that is that, during the Ottoman Empire, all these ethnic groups, I mean, they didn't melt, so to speak, to forget their ethnicity. They were alphabet soup, just the letters in a alphabet. They kept their ethnicity. I mean, they practiced who they were, their ethnicity, when they were at home, but in the marketplace during the daytime, when they got out, and they were, of course, contributing to the Turkish or
Well,
Ottoman.
So, Gene, you're bringing up a very big and important
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
because during the Ottoman Empire, a lot of people don't know that the modern Republic of Turkey It came from 1923, and prior to that, there were the Ottoman
Right.
groups. But
Bob, before you go on, can we take another break?
I think it's very appropriate.
Okay, and that's a very good subject matter to start with
Yeah.
the next session. Yeah. Okay, great. See you next time. Hello again, it's great to be with you again, and we will start where we left off the last time. So Bob, you were talking about this interesting philosophy of government policies.
Well, I'm really talking about the Armenian relationship
Okay.
within the government of the Ottomans.
Mm-hmm.
Because from my understanding is that the Armenian community, the Greek community, the Syrians, any group that was incorporated under the Ottoman Empire was actually allowed to keep their own schools. They had their own churches, their own religious beliefs. So their ethnic pride was not taken from them in Turkey. And that was a matter of government policy. So the policy of the Ottoman Turks was not to discriminate against ethnic groups, but to encourage their growth within the Ottoman Empire. And Armenians particularly had very high positions in the Ottoman Empire. So it's very illogical when we talk about genocide to think that the Ottoman Turks or even the Turks of today would have thought of such a thing, because when we think about genocide, we're talking about a government-sponsored policy, where it's the policy of the government to do bad things. And after World War I, as you know, they had the Malta, the trials, and the Armenians pushed for these particular trials. They thought that they had been treated badly, even though they'd been attempting to overthrow the Ottoman Empire in conjunction with Russians.
Right.
They thought, you know, they'd been treated badly. But the trials that were held after the war, which were at the time of these events that we're talking about, not one single military officer in the Ottoman armies was found to be guilty of any such war crimes.
And they were all high-level officials,
High-level people put on trials.
ministers, yes.
Yes, just like after the World War II, when they had the Nuremberg trials, those people were found guilty. But after World War I, when the trials were held at Armenian insistence, not one single military person was found to be guilty of any such crime. No politician was found to be guilty of any such crime. And for any person who is listening, and if you know the ethnic freedom that was experienced within the Ottoman Empire, where people were encouraged to maintain their own ethnic identity, it's illogical to even to begin thinking in those terms.
In terms of a genocide.
In terms of genocide or
Mistreatment.
yeah, I mean, when you're looking at a civil war situation, people get hurt. And I think the leader of the Turkish nation at that time was Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. And he did commemorate the sons and daughters of his enemies. He didn't say, we beat these bad people. He realized that the loss of these soldiers were the sons and daughters of parents.
Meaning at Gallipoli.
Yes, the
particularly,
Anzars,
yes,
yeah.
yes, that's
Right.
true. So, I mean, the
Because
compassion.
these things, Bob, did not really happen in a vacuum. If there were massacres or people died during those days, 1915, 16, 17, why would did the Ottomans one day just woke up and decided, now we're gonna, move against the Armenians? There are reasons. They were instigated, they were revolting, there was an insurgency. That this
Yeah.
is why measures were taken to temporarily resettle them,
Yeah.
right?
And yes, yeah, if I may interject, I mean, there were Armenians like the Dashnaks, which
Terrorist groups.
Yes, and I say that they were the first terrorist groups, as we know, in the world. I mean, the way they instigated their own people to rise up against the Turks and all that. So what I'm getting at is that, because the Armenians who were instigated by these terrorist groups, such as the Dashnaks, that the government decided to relocate the people who were causing these problems from those regions where the Armenians, so to speak, were stabbing in the back. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that you are fighting the Russians on the eastern Anatolia, and then the guy sitting next to you in the trenches, with a machine gun or that, well, maybe just guns, rifles, that he gets up and shoots you. I mean, they are Ottoman soldiers, in the same, the Armenian and the Turk, but many of the Armenians corroborated with the Russians and so on and so forth. So, but what I was going to get at is that the Armenians, the diaspora Armenians, that is the Armenians in this country, they have this, they fancy about this Armenia over there, which I'd like to distinguish the diaspora Armenians here in this country versus the Armenians who are in Armenia, who come into Turkey nowadays to become
as friends,
as friends, right? So that the diaspora Armenians here in this country, they started with the Talat Pasha telegrams, and then they said that was planned by the government, and therefore it was given orders for the genocide and so on, which was all proven to be wrong. And then they lost those arguments, and now they looked at the relocation as a genocidal act, whereas there, the Ottoman government were trying to move these people to some place. I mean, they could have killed them right there, I guess, rather than going to the trouble of having all these people move to some other part, and then they could have their properties back when they returned, and so on and so forth. Again, we are going to go into details later on this, but getting back to the notion of a government policy, which was the Ottoman policy, which was live and let live, and so, as you say, it's preposterous to think of that there was an Armenian genocide, so would like to get, in fact, the experiences that you were talking about before the break with the Armenians, the good people, the Armenian people. We would like to hear from them as well. We urge people who have these stories to come and tell us, so that everybody gets to know the good experiences that the Armenians and the Turks have had. And at the same time, of course, we are going to get into some of the details of the so-called Armenian genocide at a later date. So with that, let me leave it to Bülent, perhaps.
Maybe we can a little bit touch on the relationships of the Turkish American community in Connecticut with their elected officials. That also somehow relates to our topic, because the major effort by the Armenians is to legislate history, rather than leaving it to historians or leaving it to courts to sort through the facts. They take the shortcut to go to legislators, to media, and or to schools, and get their way this way. One important fact here is that we should also cultivate relations with our elected officials, local level, or even state level, or federal level too. And a good pioneer in this respect is also KADIR. KADIR, when he started opening up businesses in Connecticut, one initiative he took is to go to the mayor's office, go to municipalities, to the permit authorities, and establish the police department, establish relations with these authorities, so that the Turks would feel comfortable in their relationship. Would you like to say a few words about this, Kadir?
Sure. We in New Haven, when I start building businesses, it's very welcomed by the officials, elected officials. When I have any kind of problems that I face, I went to their offices and I discussed my problems, and they always help. You know, I also at the same time, when they ask me to do something, I work with with their offices, and I help the communities that we work together to make it better.
Volunteers, maybe?
Organize volunteers, donations, yeah. In you know, anytime, like you know, for instance, one time they asked me to donate some of the lights, street lights. A lot of crime happened in New Haven, so I donate some money to buy light bulbs in the whole streets. And you know,
But these are expensive light bulbs. These
Yeah.
aren't little
Yeah.
light bulbs like this. This is a lot of
And,
money.
40-watt ones.
And you know, the Thanksgiving time, there is a families that cannot afford the turkeys. You know, I donate I buy like turkeys and donate the neighborhoods that it's in the paper also. Like you know, we being in a good member of the community, we make ourselves a room in the community. So and also we I made the coat drive that who cannot afford to buy a coat, I get it from the rich customers to give the poor ones.
Oh, nice.
So mayor came to my restaurant and you know, congratulate me for that, you know, and she told me that it's a good job, you know, and she participated. She bring couple quotes. You know, I have experience like that, you know. Also one time
With the police maybe also?
yeah, one time we have a problem with the late night business customers, that they were like gang members was fighting to each other, shooting to each other. So we had
Did anybody get hurt?
someone get hurt, yes, and police chief and the mayor invite me to their office, and we had a meeting, and they asked me to close down the earlier hours. So I listened their advice, and we closed earlier, like 3-4 hours earlier than regular business hours, even though we lost some money. I love to work with the officials that we resolve the problem without hurting anybody get hurt. And my relation with my city is very good, and the fact that I invite mayor to iftar this coming Sunday, so she's coming down. I mean, every good thing you do, it just comes back to you as a community member.
Very well said.
I believe
yes,
that.
Very
Yeah.
well said.
So we are, I always feel that I am representative of my country, my culture, my people. That I always have that responsibility on top of my head that I'm glad that I think I did it with the good intent, with the good job. That's what I did all this time. I never forget that where I came from, why I'm here, what I'm doing. You know, I think is I'm gonna do rest of my life work for with that knowledge.
Wonderful. This is
Yes.
also a good example for local Turkish American associations. They could take a hint from here. Maybe Thanksgiving time they can donate their time. Maybe they can donate even some food to the pantries. If
Yeah.
there is, let's say, I know there are a lot of locally on Veterans Day, a lot of parades. We can take our flag and then participate
Right.
in those parades. So, you know, be
Yeah.
involved, be
Well,
active.
I think
It goes a
it-
long way because
Yes.
it comes back.
Sure, sure, and
And-
well said, as Kadir said.
Yes.
Yes, but you know, I'm happy to say that these kinds of things are really taking place all around the country. I mean, you know, Turks are very active, and they do have their you know, walks and etc. But I guess what at least TADA is trying to do is have these kinds of good things that are happening be heard, be known by the public at large.
Right.
In other words, rather than each community knowing about his or her own community, you know, we are trying to invite people to come over and tell us about your experiences, you know, as to what you are doing, how you are, you know, communicating with your representatives, what your relations are, and so forth. So I think that that's really great, as you were saying, BULENT, that you know, working with the police or with the mayor and so on and so forth at the grassroots level. I think these are wonderful things to do.
Right.
And I know, Bob, you played quite an important role in that venue, like
Yeah.
having the Turkish flag on the state building.
Right. Well, BULENT was president of the Turkish American Association in
Right.
Connecticut,
Right.
and he played a huge role himself, so it's
Sure.
not just one person.
Sure.
But I had one comment to share with the listeners and yourself. It's a theory, unproven, but it's something we should think about. Who was behind the Armenian instigation around World War I? It was the Russians.
Yes.
The Armenians joined the Russian army. The Russian army was moving in from the east, trying to move in and take a part of the Ottoman Empire from the south. Armenians were being used by the Russians as pawns for their geopolitical goals. And that is borne out in speeches that we can talk about later by Armenian leaders. It's provable. It's not, that is not a hypothetical statement. It is true.
Yeah, their first prime minister, Hovhannes Katsununi.
Oh yes.
I mean, his
Yes.
book explains all this, and
Yeah.
then he really condemns the Dashnags for collaborating with the Russians
But
rather than
if
the
we
Ottomans.
take that knowledge that we know, now we move to the United States. Did you know that in 1980s, the FBI documented that 25% of the terrorism in the United States was committed by Armenian terrorists?
No, I didn't know that.
And when did the claims of genocide start popping up?
80s.
All right, now, today, as we speak, in the Congress and the halls of the Senate, what are they talking about? Russian interference in the political process in the United States. Well, I want to tell you, Russia has been involved in this by promoting Armenian interests to disrupt the United States. These claims of genocide are not relevant politically, and they're not true. It's like the U.S. Civil War. We have one battle in Gettysburg. 50,000 people get killed almost overnight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a civil war. And in the World War I period, it might be compared somewhat to a civil war, because part of the empire, the Armenian part, and then the non-Armenian part, the Russians, were actually trying to overthrow the country, just like the South was trying to take over part of America. But then we see the Russian involvement, documented Russian involvement. Then we come to the 80s, and now we come to 2017. And if you listen to early Armenian speeches, their goals are long-term. They're not short-term goals. And when you cause when people are not sure, and they start making decisions that aren't based on fact, then one group of people begins to feel animosity towards the other. And when people have mistrust, that's how one government gets another government destroyed. And so I think, this is a theory, but there's a lot of fact that we could discuss on another meeting to show
Right.
this point, that there is and has been Russian interference, probably going back into the 1700s. Certainly during World War I. Then we have the confrontation after World War II, and now we see it today. So we can talk about the areas where discrimination based on our Armenian claims against Turks comes in, and we should fight it because it's not true. And one of the greatest battles is led by people like KADIR and BULENT and yourself, when we're meeting people face to face as people, and we share the same loves in this world. But there are some people, like we see with ISIS and other groups worldwide, that don't have the same respect for life that we do. And so those groups, like the Ku Klux Klan, have to be stopped. And in America, we hope we're not stopping them with bullets.
Right.
But what your association is doing is saying, we love you, we're working with you, we're part of the society, but eventually, if it persists and lies are told, it has to be confronted in the court system. And you have the attorneys available to do that in your association, and I hope we don't have to come to that type of thing, because that's not our goal.
But you mentioned the Russian interference. Another example that you might have left out is the situation in Azerbaijan,
Oh,
the
yes.
Karabakh region, and then Khojalı.
In
massacre.
Georgia?
Yes, in Georgia.
Georgia, yeah.
If they complain that they suffered victimhood, Armenians, why are they victimizing the Azeris in invading their country and ethnically cleansing Karabakh region? 1 million people were at gunpoint.
In Azerbaijan.
Yes, and
That
then
was terrible.
several thousand were
That
killed
was terrible.
initially in
Right.
Khojalı. And this is like a double standard. Again, behind this is Russia.
So, of course, we can identify these problems, which is good. We need to, but we shall continue in the next sessions to get into more details as to what we are. One thing that I'd like to talk about is that, there are the opinion makers, and those opinions are presented as facts.
That's absolutely correct.
And so I think we have to sort of focus on that, and then let everybody know how these things are being done, like the proclamations by cities and so on and so forth. They say that, well, they have they have the right to state their opinion, but when it comes from a governmental organization, that opinion then perceived as a fact.
Yes.
And so we have to put a stop to that as well. So with that, we shall see you next time.
I think we also should, I would like to take a minute to thank Turkish Channel TV
Yes.
for sponsoring us, for helping with these sessions and making the world public. Again, that's turkishchanneltv.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is